My headache was incessant. It was absolutely 24 hours of every single day. Category 10, misery headache.
There was one point in particular when he had really severe head pain and his lips were white with pain, I remember. And the blood had all drained out of his face. And we had guns in the house. That was back in New Mexico, where everybody has guns. And I was really scared that he was going to just blow his head off. Your personality erodes. You become less and less of someone who's able to cope with things. And my life consists of, you know, very little. Watching old movies and TV and wishing I could read like I used to, and you know, no friends. You know, friends you make when you're a young person. They are looking for other young people to have fun with. You know, and you know, I quit being fun. You know, a very long time ago indeed.
Well, when he's better, he is awake and he's upright, and he usually is fixing up the house or something. And when he's, you know, not doing all that well, he's usually in bed, groaning and asking for things, you know. And you can tell when he's in pain. You can see it in his eyes. You can feel it as well.
It destroys the quality of your life. There is no life when you have to continually battle this type of pain.
Richard wanted a good prognosis, but that would mean that he should be better when he's not, and that's failure on his part. So when he had received the bad prognosis, it actually made him feel better because it legitimized his pain.
He's missed like birthdays and stuff because of his illness, and it's like I sort of am jealous of like all the people I know who have like fathers that do stuff for them.
Under normal conditions, people have endorphins, which are otherwise known as opioids, that control pain for them. When it gets started, it gets modulated, and then it stops. Chronic pain is a disease state where that situation gets out of control and the pain takes over.
I have a disease that affects all my joints. Different joints are in a different state at different times.
Sean has this thing called Elhers-Danlos syndrome, which is a congenital connective tissue disorder. And what it means is people have it and they have just what they call benign hypermobility, which means they're very flexible, and that can be inconsequential. Or you can have it and have it be very consequential and cause a great deal of pain and immobility and problems. Sean has a fairly severe case, but more than that, he just didn't understand that he had it his whole youth, and so he developed, you know, he was very physical in ways he probably shouldn't have been, and he developed a lot of, I guess, micro injuries, and we didn't know that that was probably what was responsible for his original headaches. And the neck, he has way too much mobility in his neck, which then injured his neck over and over and over again. So Sean just ended up with all these joint problems and whatnot as a result.
I'm in a wheelchair. I have difficulty walking. I was originally injured in a motor vehicle accident in 1985. I went through a surgery on my spine in 1985.
It's a fact that 80% of us will have back pain sometime during our lives. Now, for some of those with serious pain, there is a surgical treatment using back screws. And every year, tens of thousands of people have these screws surgically implanted into their spines. But a 2020 investigation has uncovered some shocking facts about this technique that have never been reported before.
At the heart of this potential scandal are a group of patients in Lake Charles who were told they needed special back surgery and then ended up with canes and braces and ruined lives after screws and plates were implanted in their backs.
It got to where when the plates was in here, it felt like somebody had a knife in my back.
My back felt like it was being pulled apart, like something was behind me and something was in front of me, just pulling. I put my wife and child through hell every day. Every day. Because of this.
In a typical operation, bone from the vertebra is removed. Then, to stabilize the spine, screws are inserted through plates into the part of the vertebra called the pedicle. The risks of the operation are frightening. The pedicle is right next to the spinal column and emerging spinal nerves. If the screws break or are inserted incorrectly, the results can be catastrophic, including permanent nerve damage.
Viewers of 2020 just saw a national television report on an issue we first told you about last month, a controversial treatment for back pain that many patients say made their problems worse and not better. Since we first broadcast that report, almost 200 other people have called to tell us about their similar experiences.
Theirs are the voices of anguished suffering.
He sleeps in one room, and I have to, and he listens to me cry all night in pain.
People who share a common experience, unrelenting back pain, intensified, they believe, by a procedure they thought would help them.
I'm convinced that beyond any doubt that I'm much worse after the surgery.
Richard Paey is one of nearly 200 people who contacted us following our first reports. All of the patients who called had received pedicle screws and plates for a variety of spinal problems.
It isn't generally known that pain is a damaging condition. Acute pain is the essential precondition for the development of the disease we call chronic pain. That's why it's imperative when somebody develops an acutely painful situation, either from an injury or an infection or a surgery, that their pain levels be maintained as close to zero as possible to prevent the development of chronic pain, which is the disease. The disease of chronic pain is located in the dorsal horn of the spinal cord. That's ground zero. That's the gate and the gate control hypothesis. And the gate decides whether or not a pain impulse coming in from the periphery gets conducted up to the brain. And the gate is where opioids work in treating the disease of chronic pain. If the dose is sufficient, the opioids shut the gate, and the pain impulses don't go to the brain, so the pain isn't perceived.
In Florida, it's a violation of law for doctors to prescribe what the statute says is excessive or inappropriate amounts of controlled substances, pain medication. If it's excessive or inappropriate, it's not in the course of the doctor's professional practice. And if it's more than 28 grams, which is just one prescription, in the case of 60 or 70 pills, it makes it a drug trafficking offense in Florida. They followed me for months, based entirely on looking at my prescription records and the number of dose units I had taken. They considered I had taken more than the normal amount. The police came to that determination. And the fact that my doctor was authorizing all these, he said, made my doctor a suspect too. They broke in the door with automatic weapons. They were wearing black hoods, black masks, and blacked out uniforms and ran through the house screaming. I mean, that event alone, I worried about the trauma that it's caused my children. They found nothing other than my medical records, which they took, and empty prescription containers, which when they found them, they thought it was the equivalent of evidence of the weapons of mass destruction. They paraded around as if this was, again, mass evidence of some crime, massive crime.
Bottle of his pain medication meet the law for trafficking. And all they wanted to prove was that he got it fraudulently. And the only way they needed to prove that is to have a credible witness, the doctor, say that he did not give it intentionally. If he felt that Richard had defrauded him into giving him the medication in any way, source, then it can be called trafficking.
They knew before they got there that he had been repeatedly verifying all my medication. They told me he faced a 25-year sentence in Florida for writing my prescriptions. They went so far as to tell him that they knew I sold them. I understand the dilemma he was put in. He was put in a situation no doctor should be put in. He was put in a situation to choose to literally incriminate himself or incriminate me. I lost all hope that I was getting a fair trial when they began to emotionalize the issues. They began to sensationalize pain treatment as feel-good medicine. Over and over again, he used the word addict, and he would bang on the table. They called me a drug trafficker. At the end, they had to admit that I wasn't a drug trafficker, that I was a drug abuser. They used the word drug abuser and addict repeatedly, as if that was the crime itself. I was arrested and told I faced 25-year mandatory minimum sentence and a $500,000 fine. Was almost within the same sentence. They told me that, of course, they would be more than willing to listen if I had anything to say against my doctor. And it just kind of fell in on me at that moment that, is this what's going on? I realized that if they were charging me with drug trafficking and they wanted me to plead guilty, that all their statistics had to be suspect. If I was considered a drug trafficker, I couldn't trust anything they said. In fact, ultimately, as time progressed and we got closer to law day, they offered me deals. Their first offer was probation, 1 year probation. I thought, how interesting. The penalty for the crime is 25 years. The legislature says it's 25 years, mandatory minimum sentence. And the state attorney is arresting people after months of investigation and offering 1 year probation. What is that telling me? What's that telling? And I would have had to, confess.
I begged. I said for us to do this. And so he agreed, and he's bawling. And he went in, and then they took the deal out from underneath him. And my understanding, that's right for prosecutors, that they can offer those deals and they can withdraw them as they choose. So they withdrew it. And my husband, just with a smile on his face, sat there and said, "Don't ask me to do that again." And he told me afterwards he was so glad, because he's the type of person that he is he is so idealistic. He wanted to have a legacy. He wanted to have a career. He's just a unique person, and he's always wanted to know how he would be under the test, and this was a test. So, and for him to have done something that he was entirely against would have been who he was as a person. You have to understand, he felt he did not have much of a life to give up. He didn't have his career. He went through the schooling. He wasn't the father he wanted to be. He wasn't the husband he wanted to be. So this was really important to him. And so here he sits in jail, happy that he made the right choice, and he knows in his heart he made the right choice. He knows they're wrong. He knows this is wrong, and I just have to deal with it, and he has to deal with it, and the children have to deal with it.
I refused to accept the offered plea bargain because the price of the plea bargain was my silence. I would never be able to raise any of the issues that came up both before and during the trial. I felt it was too important for me to speak out, and the price for silence was, even for my freedom, which I recognize now, it's a terrible cost, but it was something I couldn't remain silent.
It was an awakening to me that as I see him bawling, saying, he's just sobbing so horribly, saying that he would do this, I realized that I'm asking something of him that I shouldn't be asking. I was wrong to ask of it. So right now, it's really pretty much where we're trying to, you know, I know it's the right decision to make, but soon afterwards I told him I'll know it's the right decision if I get you out.
I saw in their chart and it said that in 2001, 557 doctors were investigated. What do they mean by investigated? My doctor endured a 4-hour interview, several days of phone calls. They didn't consider him investigated. If he wasn't investigated, what do they consider investigated?
When the trial was going on, Rich felt that his biggest regret was with the children. He felt that I could handle it, he could handle it, and that he will be gone, and he's not sure how long.
And Mom was like, Dad's not coming home. And it was like really upsetting because we were always used to, like, whenever I'd have just a little fight, I know I could always go to my dad, and he's always listening.
And it's like, you know, where's Dad? It was really bad. Well, how long is he going to be gone? I don't know. You know, it's for the appeal to go through, it's easily, they said, 1.5 to 2 years. And so, you know, they're doing the math.
I'm just thinking, like, this month will be my dad's birthday. We won't be able to spend it with him. And pretty soon my birthday, that's in December. And then there's Christmas.
I think the only thing I could say is Agnes. Yeah.
So much.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm lucky because, as a father, because I get to always be there for my kid. It's the way that, like, a sick old retired granddad is always there for somebody. I mean, he's not really much fun, you know. He doesn't do much anything. He can't play, throw the ball, or anything. He's kind of like something Gahan Wilson drew over in the corner, you know. But he's there. By God, he's there. He's always there. So this kid is never alone. This kid's always at least got Grandpa. Well, that's about the way that I'm always there for Ro.
I think I know my dad much better than most people know their dad, because he's been at home every day, you know. My friends, one of my friends, actually, a long time ago, whenever I'd have a sleepover, his, you know, dad would come home at midnight or later. And it just seemed so awful to me, you know. How can he bear that, you know?
But the issue is that kids need things. You know, when I was a young, strong young person, I would always pick up the little kids and throw them in the air because they loved that. And I was a big, strong guy. I could pick them up, throw them in the air and catch them, throw them in the air and catch them. And I never could do that for my own son, because by the time he was born, I was already pretty beaten down.
Chronic pain destroys families. Pain isn't just an individual effect. It controls families, and it affects our entire economy. We lose $100 billion a year to untreated pain.
When it becomes a chronic problem, it becomes so emotionally draining on you, the fear and the anxiety of getting the medication and then having to delegate it to the spouse to help you in this. I was finding that I really couldn't function in the role of as we eventually had children, as a father, helping with the house and the children without medication. It was too hard on me. I would have to keep laying down, taking breaks. The pain was just exhausting.
I mean, it was just the hardest kind of grind, you know. And I used to wake up in the mornings, and I'm sure there's so many people going through it like this. You know, you wake up in the morning and literally stand in the kitchen and look at the, you know, the Chex cereal, you know, and think, if I start screaming now, I'll never stop. You know, and just go, okay, what's it going to take to not scream today?
I do worry about the fact that, you know, sort of in a way, every day could be his last because he's in that much pain.
Ronan has seen me on death's door. He's seen me resuscitated.
You know, you lose sleep over it. That's for sure.
I think it was about 2 years ago that Sean and I got divorced. We had a very difficult marriage, obviously. This pressure that was on us and is on us destroys an enormous number of marriages. It's almost impossible to know how many.
I realized that from the patients I've met over the years, that the chronic pain has a terribly destructive effect on marriages.
I think it was very distressing to look up and realize that I just couldn't stay married no matter how hard I wanted to, no matter how much I wanted to, no matter how hard I tried. I just couldn't. I couldn't stay in it and do it with the idea that there would no more ever be, you know, real partnership or any hope for that kind of. But I still take care of him because you end up being the only person they have. And the truth is, I couldn't leave Sean now, even if I wanted to, because it would be a death sentence for him. They don't give drugs to single people.
Getting abused at a pain clinic is de rigueur. It is absolutely inevitable. The way they treat patients is systematized abuse.
Every pain patient has to prove they're worthy. They have to prove there's such an environment of suspicion that you must prove that you are needy. You have to prove that you didn't abuse it. You have to prove that you weren't overdoing it, that you were managing it correctly. I mean, in other words, you have to prove that you're not human. Yet everyone else, if their stomach's upset and they need to take some more stomach medicine, don't they take it? Are the police going to come by and say, you took 2 pills? Whereas the pain patients, if they finish early, that's a drug-seeking behavior. Right. If they ask for it, that's a drug-seeking behavior.
When a patient is undertreated and asks for a larger prescription or more pills, that's a red flag or an aberrant drug-related behavior called unsanctioned dosage escalation. The doctors are trained to look for those things and to suspect addiction. So what was perfectly normal, legitimate behavior on the patient's part and entirely expected becomes a diagnostic sign of addiction.
I told him that the number of pills just, it didn't work out. The math on it and stuff, the way he was doing it. And I was explaining too that these pills were wearing off in more like 3 hours and not 4 hours. And he said to me that this was drug-seeking behavior. And I said, yes, I mean, that's what I'm here for. I didn't understand that the yes was an agreement with his proposition that I was but to me, drug-seeking was what I was doing. I was there for my medication.
Asking for more medication is considered to be more or less airtight proof that you're an addict. Now, what are you supposed to do if they've given you some medication but you're still in pain? Well, guess what you're not supposed to do? Not ask for more, no matter if they're sending you home with too little, no matter what. That's abusive. You can't show people what they need and then punish them for asking for it.
I got pretty mad at one of my dad's doctors. In fact, the last time he was in the hospital, the doctor said, and excuse my language, "You're fucked," to my dad. And, you know, I was there. And so my dad was saying, "Please, just give me more medicine. I need it really bad," you know. And, you know, he just said it, you know, right out there.
It makes it impossible for patients to be honest with their doctors, and it precludes the possibility of patients being adequately treated, because it becomes a don't ask, don't tell sort of thing. Doctors don't ask their patients, "Are you getting enough medication to control your pain?" And patients are effectively prescribed from telling their physicians that they're undertreated.
My husband was fearful. He would put pain, I don't know if your husband did this, he would hide his medicine in numerous spots so that if he couldn't get it, if he ran out, that he could find it in the house. He would, and the biggest problem was his memory was poor, and we would be searching the house every 2 months looking for something, because he came up short, because he was trying to live his life.
Right, because he wasn't focused on drugs.
That's right.
That's what always drove me crazy. We weren't focused on drugs. We didn't want to be focused on drugs. We wanted to focus on life. And so because we didn't focus on drugs, we came off as aberrant to these doctors who are obsessed with drugs because they're trying to treat pain in the drug war.
Doctors who treat pain typically develop Jekyll and Hyde personalities because of the social pressures they endure. They want to feel good about making their patients' lives better. And on that day, their patient's a good patient. But the next time they come back, the doctor may be wildly suspicious and paranoid and accusatory. And it keeps patients on edge because they don't know which doctor they're going to see.
We would read that contract. Have you ever seen those contracts?
Yeah.
That a pain specialist you had before didn't have those contracts. That's something new. A pain contract that says you won't see another doctor for pain meds. Someone where you only go to one pharmacist. A contract that says that they're not available and don't even call on nights and weekends. That you must go to the ER. But a pain contract that does not tell us that they will take care of his pain. So I must sign this, and Richard must sign it, or he does not have this man as a doctor, and there's no one else.
You know, you have to take whatever they want. You have to take, if they want you to take 15 other drugs in addition to the opioids, just so that makes it look like they're practicing medicine as opposed to just giving opioids. You have to buy those drugs. If they want you to take a bunch of tests, you have to take them.
He kept wanting me to try this and that. I would try anything he threw at me, but he finally wanted to give me a massive dose of this stuff that I didn't have a good reaction to the first time, and he wanted to give me a huge systemic IV dose of it, and the very thought just made me want to jump out of my skin. I mean, it was a bad chemical for me, you know. But what he wanted was, and it's so clear in retrospect, he wanted to be seen to be trying things other than opiates, you know. He knew that it was just a matter of time if he kept on, you know, giving me opiates. And he blew up at me. And he started yelling at me, "Morphine, morphine, morphine," all you ever want is morphine. And I said, I'm sorry, you know, if orange juice would get me out of pain, I would settle for orange juice, you know, but this is the only thing that works, you know, and I hate pain. And so that's why I call for this thing, the only thing that works.
Yeah, doctors are supposed to be rational, but I don't think anybody is rational when they feel the full force of the federal government aimed at their head.
They would always give the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories along with the narcotic. And we had piles. My husband felt that he had to fill it. He didn't want to say no. He was afraid to say no. So we would fill them. And we had bottles and bottles of Motrin in our house. They were all over the place. He felt insecure throwing them out. He didn't know what to do with them, so they were all over in our house.
I had been taking Motrin for the longest time, which he wanted me to take as an adjunct to these other medications. Unfortunately, I developed 2 bleeding ulcers.
They just roll their eyes and tell you to sit down, and you beg them and you plead, please help, please help, please help. And I would beg before, because what if he just walked out? You know, because if he did, he would just kill himself. So I was trying to keep him there, but they wanted him to go. It's impossible to believe, you know, that your community place treats you that way.
Being questioned and scrutinized, you're treated like you are a criminal when you come in there. And
here I have a husband who is in such horrible pain he can't tolerate it, that I have to bring me and my 3 children with him and sit in a waiting room. And since it's not, when it's triaged, it's what can wait. So he's going to sit there in 4 hours and get into even more pain. And then he has to hope that this doctor, who has seen enough pain patients, will know that it's okay to give him pain medication. He would show his scar. It forces you to lie to get pain treatment. It forces you to say, well, did you hurt yourself? And we're like, well, maybe he twisted funny.
Yeah. Right, something.
He did something.
Right.
Because you're not allowed to go in there and just have pain.
No.
You have to have a reason. So he said, yeah, and I was like, yeah, I saw him twist. I remember only once of all those times that I came in with my husband where the emergency room doc had seen pain before and had seen patients. And he said, you poor man. And we just about cried. It was horrible to feel such gratitude to get treated. I want somebody to look at him and say, yes, I can see you're in pain. But nobody, the doctors were so fearful that this is a man who's going to try to cajole them, to twist their arms to give him pain medication when it's unnecessary. That is so horrible that when they looked at me and looked at him, they're trying to size us up. They're not caring whether there's a man before them in pain that needs help.
And I said, what is the problem? Why won't you? Why won't anybody just do it? What's the matter? I didn't understand. And he said, diversion. Yes. And I didn't know what he was talking about. I thought he was talking about going to like an amusement park. I didn't know what he's talking about. And so then when I found out, when he explained, you know, oh, it's we're worried that you might sell it. You could have knocked me over with. I mean, I was, excuse me? But prior to that, I didn't think of myself as being on a stage when I went in to see a doctor. I thought I was just me and he was just him and that was a doctor and he was going to look at us straight, you know, like we were people who needed help. I thought, oh, well, I come from a wealthy family. I don't dress like that. Maybe that's the problem. So I started dressing like that and I bought a fur coat And I wore, you know, the jewelry that I never wear. And I went to the doctor that way. And I tried to act like my grandmother. Because
Did it work?
Yeah. It worked.
It worked?
Sure. Because we were no longer a threat. Because we didn't need the money.
I have a morphine pump in my side. My dose is equivalent to 90 10 milligram pills, as I was told, 90 10 daily. So I would need to replace it with an oral dose of 90 a day. At the time I went to the pump, I was taking approximately 23 pills a day. Actually, I look back now and realize that I'd reached what was some imaginary line that I couldn't go any further. I'd reached the most where these local doctors would treat by oral dosage.
We're on our last doctor. I don't know where we're gonna go if this guy kicks Sean out, and he's tried a bunch of different times in a bunch of different ways to kick Sean out. Richard Paey is a political liability for Jeb Bush. You know, he really ought not let Richard die. You know, so in a way, Richard's been getting better care than he's ever gotten, you know, sort of anywhere. Whereas Sean's not anybody's political liability at this point.
I've received better than what I would have expected treatment, and I have to question why. They did send me out. They didn't just let my pump run dry, which my doctor on the outside said would likely kill me had it happened. They did send me out to a private pain management doctor who's been refilling the pump.
You know, it's really troubling to realize that, you know, if you can get a lawyer and you have a client in prison, you can essentially force the issue and make them take care of them, make them take care of their pain, make them, you know, you have to run a constitutional prison, but you don't have to run a constitutional country.
Oh, I'm a wreck. Look, will you give me another one of those headache powders? Headache powders? Oh, you poor sap. Haven't you tumbled yet? Those headache powders are dope. Dope? You mean I've been taking dope? Yeah, dope. Cocaine.
Did you work today?
No. No one seemed to need even a part-time or relief girl. But one of the girls at the drive-in gave me these donuts.
Donuts? Donuts? I can't eat. I don't want food. I want a shot. I've got to have a shot.
The appearances were, look at this, he's got no life. All he does is ask for the drug. Isn't that what we were told to watch out for? Isn't that that's it, isn't it? That's a drug fiend, right?
But he can't work, Mrs. Grady. He's sick.
Sick? Looks to me more like a hothead. Well, I'll give you one more day.
Hothead.
I myself judged me. You know, I judged me and decided that I was a junkie.
Please, Eddie, don't go to pieces. You've got to get hold of yourself.
I can't get hold of myself. I gotta have dope. I'm a hophead. I'd sell my soul for just one shot.
I hadn't given it any thought, you know. I was raised in this culture. I didn't know that you could take those drugs every day and not be an addict. I assumed, like everyone else, if you take those drugs every day, you're an addict. That's what an addict is.
My husband always worried, am I an addict? Linda, do you really think I'm an addict? I could stop these, you know, and he'd throw them in the toilet, flush them down, and then in 2 hours be in such horrible pain that he's just crying. And it's not the addiction, it's the pain.
We went into the whole thing. We had shrinks telling us he was an addict. I believed it. He believed it. Because if he were an addict, then maybe he could stop being an addict. But if you're in pain, you can't stop being in pain.
No,
so he was hoping to be an addict, you know?
I know.
I know. It would have been better.
Addiction is a psychological and behavioral syndrome consisting of cravings for a substance loss of control of use, and continuing use in spite of harm. It needs to be distinguished from a phenomenon called dependence, which is a physiological condition that says if a patient is abruptly withdrawn from opioids, they'll suffer from a physical withdrawal syndrome.
I threw my pills away several times. I tried to flush them down the toilet. I was afraid of them. I believed everything I'd been told about this, hearing from even from my doctors and my family about not taking the, tough it out.
Opioid addiction among pain patients is vanishingly rare because of the phenomenon of tolerance. That prevents people from getting high if they take opioids continuously. They just don't feel them except for pain relief. And the evidence that we have is compelling that pain patients aren't getting addicted to opioids.
And I would go to these 12-step meetings, and I would just listen to people talk about how badly they wanted to drink, how badly they wanted to take drugs, and I didn't want to take any drugs. I didn't want any painkillers, except when I had pain.
Addiction and pain treatment are distinguishable because they have diametrically opposed endpoints. When a patient is treated effectively for pain, they get better. When somebody gets addicted to opioids, by definition, they get worse. And that makes it look like it's a lot of insanity to be looking at aberrant drug-related behaviors and red flags when we have a perfectly good way to measure addiction. We look at how the patient's functioning, and that's really all we need to know whether or not there's a problem.
They said say no to drugs. They forgot to put a little footnote down there that's to say that some people can't say no. Drugs are not inherently good or evil. It depends on how they're used. And for years we're telling the population, we're telling the citizens that drugs are simply bad, and people that use them, by extension, are bad too. It's a paradox here to say drugs are bad and yet to know that people must take them. I mean, perhaps it was an early mistake they made by declaring war on another noun.
March 1st, 2004, the entire federal government got together and announced that the war on drugs had become a war on prescription drug abuse, and that their entire law enforcement apparatus was going to focus on physicians.
One might say that that announcement by the federal government in March of 2004 shut down the field of pain management.
Curbing the diversion of legal drugs into the illegal market, whether through negligence, theft, fraud, or forgery, is a leading priority for the Drug Enforcement Administration.
The crisis was deep already with the undertreatment of pain, but that made it much, much worse. And I know that because I get calls and emails from patients all over the country who can't find a doctor to treat their pain, and where 2 or 3 years ago I might have been able to find them one, I can't do that anymore.
Prescription drug abuse is harming and killing some of our best and brightest minds.
The illegal diversion and abuse of prescription drugs is becoming an increasingly serious problem.
For effective public health protection, we know that education must be combined with strong enforcement of the law.
What we have seen and see every day is the incredible path of misery and wake of family destruction and addiction left by the illegal use of prescription drugs.
We intend to continue to partner with d.e.a. to crack down on those who inappropriately push controlled prescription drugs on the public.
The 10,000 men and women of the Drug Enforcement Administration stand ready to implement the President's drug strategy.
It's inane to believe that some spillage that comes out of doctors' offices is responsible for the drug problem in the United States. I mean, it's obscene. And yet the whole federal government got together and said that.
In order to discuss the history of pain treatment in the United States, it's essential to go back to 1914, when opioids were banned. What happened then, effectively, is the regulation of pain management landed in the hands of law enforcement, and that's where it's been ever since. And that's a fundamental error in social policy that precludes pain treatment being a reality in the United States.
They're not following medical standards. They're following law enforcement standards. And so we didn't understand that by making a law like that, we were making law enforcement in charge of medicine.
Medical standards are supposed to come from scientific research, and they're supposed to be based on what's best for patients. That's called the evidence-based standard of care. And if doctors regulated medicine, that's what it would be. When the police regulate medicine, the standards are based on social concerns, such as preventing addiction in the community.
We have here is this overprotectiveness run mad, and this perception that the molecule itself, the opioid molecule, is an evil molecule. It's inherently evil.
If these drugs aren't medicine, except under certain circumstances, right? They're not medicine, they're evil. Then they may or may not be evil in a given context inside of medicine. And if you're a doctor, you're not going to really be very excited about taking that chance.
I feel that the patient's fate is absolutely tied in with the doctor's.
So do I.
And it is not until that they are allowed to treat people as patients, entirely as patients, not as to-be criminals at any day when they do anything weird with their pain medicines and their pain prescriptions, you know, who has to be hawked on. No, as just their patients. Then you'll see adequate pain care. That's the only time you'll see it.
Over the last 10 years, there have been lots of encouragement from official bodies, state medical organizations, and medical boards encouraging primary care physicians to treat pain. And guidelines have been promulgated and laws have been enacted supposedly to promote that activity. But over the last 5 or 6 years, everybody's realized that it's a really dangerous thing for the doctor to do.
I mean, all these guys put their lives on the line over the last 5 years, 7 years. They took medicine at its word, you know, they took the government at its word. The FDA and academic medicine got together and they said, treat pain. You have to treat pain. It's wrong not to treat pain. And then these guys go out there.
And they get hunted down.
And they get hunted down like animals, and they get dragged around with shackles on, and they get paraded before the press and called drug dealers no better than the crack dealer on the street by federal prosecutors on the front page of the Washington Post.
What's going on here is the law of unintended consequences that attends everything that has anything to do with the war on drugs.
People crash cars too, but you don't see that reflected in the whole transaction of selling a car or buying a car or anything like that. Cars are for driving. Glue is for gluing tables together.
There can be tragedies everywhere.
You can abuse anything.
That's right.
But if you focus on this end point, then everything leading up to that is totally determined by that then.
Physicians are trained to think about all the possibilities, but physicians are much safer in this regulatory environment if they see an aberrant drug-related behavior just to use the off-with-his-head approach.
Our government is attacking us in our hour of need. And this was supposed to be a country, you know, of the people, by the people, for the people. It was not supposed to be that we have this enormous, out-of-control bureaucracy that's eating us alive.
And I'm not surprised that they decided to lie to my doctor, because they've often said that the first thing that's lost during war is the truth. And there was a lot of that lost here during this investigation.
You know, it's just time for us to own up and get Richard out of jail, and get us out of jail too. We'd like to be able to go somewhere else. We'd like to be able to make a decision about where we live. We'd like to be able to choose a doctor. We'd like it if a doctor were abusive to us, we could just tell him to take a hike and go find somebody else.
Everyone knows that this has happened to a friend of theirs or a member of their immediate family, but everyone has not yet put it together that this has also happened to everyone else, that this is now the way hospitals are run.
And it's called, I mean, what we're talking about here, what you're seeing about my life and about Linda's life and Richard's and Sean's and all of our children, they call that the chilling effect. And I just think that word is so small for what we're talking about.
We will never know how many pain patients have gone home and fallen below the line, lost their relationships to their friends and family unnecessarily because their personality eroded under the absence of the medication, because their family decided that this was just evidence that they were, look, they're just junkies, they can't get their junk. All this horrible suffering, so unnecessary.
All the people in pain have an underlying condition. They have a disease or an injury. We take so much strength to try to fight that. And then we have to fight the pain. Then we have to fight the medical establishment to try to get pain relief. Then, and now, like in Richard's case, we have to fight the whole criminal justice system. I mean, it's the reason I really believe that pain patients and their families have not been heard is because it takes so much out of us,
right,
to help them through this, that there isn't enough energy.
I don't think the word chilling actually captures what we're talking about there. We're talking about the control of medicine at its most fundamental level. You know, the moment when the doctor either responds or doesn't respond to suffering.
Okay.
Honey, we love you.
Oh, thank you so much for coming down. You guys.
We'll come and see you soon, okay?
Oh, you know, you don't have to come back here. This is not a place for
We'll get you
human
out.
beings. I'll survive. Don't worry about being here. I'll survive. Maybe I found a home down there in J dorm.